All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Bernd, and today is day 2 of Advent of Code. Today's puzzle was about a bag. So we have an elf, and he plays a game with us. In particular, he has a small bag with some cubes in it, and each of the cubes is either red, green, or blue. And then a few times he will reach into the bag and show us a few of the cubes. And yeah, so in our input, we have different games, and for each game, the bag always stays the same. And in the first game, for example, he reaches in the bag 3 times. The first time he shows us 3 blue and 4 red. The second time he shows us 1 red, 2 green, and 3 blue cubes. And the last third time he will show us 2 green cubes. Then we want to know, for each game, we want to know if it's possible that there are only 12 red cubes, 13 green cubes, and 14 blue cubes in the bag for this particular game. If this is true, we take the game ID and we add them all together where it is possible, and this will give us the solution for the first part. All right, so how can we do that in Python in code? So what we will use for, will we have to have the color enum, so that just gives us all the 3 colors and the corresponding string which are used in the text. And then we will consider these samples where he reaches in the cube and shows a few of the cubes, and it will be a dictionary for each of the colors to in the integer how many of the color he showed us. In order to solve the problem, we of course need to read the input. We can just do that by reading the file and splitting it into different lines. And then we want to be able to parse the line and extract the information for the line. So that would be the example line. And then first we split it by the colon into the game name as well as the string that corresponds to all the information about the samples. And then from the game name, we can get the game ID by just getting rid of the first letters game and the space character and converting this into integer. And then we also want to extract the sample information from the second part. So first we can split it into the strings corresponding to each single sample by splitting by the semicolon. And then for each of those strings corresponding to one sample, we want to parse the corresponding sample string. And then we'll end up with a list of all the samples by parsing each single sample string. And that will be our result from parsing the line. So how do we parse a sample string? So an example from a sample string would be this, so 3 blue and 4 red. And first we split it into the strings corresponding to each color by using the as character. And then we go for each of those color strings. And we can again split it by the space character one last time. And this gives us the string corresponding to the amount and the string corresponding to the color. And then we can save this information in the dictionary and first convert the amount to integer, of course. And then for the whole result, we can go for each of the colors in our enum, so that's red, green, and blue, and then check the color dictionary. If the color value is in there, we'll return that value, and if it's not in there, that means it was not in the line, and that means he showed us 0 of the cubes of that color. So that would be our default. Yes, so the parsing is a bit complicated, so we should test that if it works as expected. So first, if the sample string, if we can parse the sample string correctly, for example, for this sample string, we hope that we get that the parsing gives us 3 blue cubes in the sample, 4 red cubes in the sample, and 0 green cubes in the sample. So let's give it a try. That looks good. Similarly, we can check if it works on the whole line. So particularly for this line, the game ID would be 1, and then there is 2 samples, this first sample and the second sample, so we hope that there are 2 samples. And the first sample again has 3 blue, 4 red, and no green cubes. And the second sample has 5 green, 2 red, and 0 blue cubes. So let's have a look. That also looks good. So now we can parse a line. Now from that we can use that to complete the solution. So as mentioned before, a sample is possible if there's at most 12 red cubes, at most 13 green cubes, and at most 14 blue cubes. So we can, if we want to check if a sample is possible, if there's more than 12 red cubes, we know it's not possible. Similarly, if there's more than 13 green cubes, it's not possible. And if there's more than 14 blue cubes, it's not possible. If none of those conditions hold, then we know it's possible, so we return true. And simply, if we want to check a list of samples, we just go through all the samples. If a single sample is not possible, then we know the whole list of samples is not possible and return false. Otherwise, if all the samples are possible, we return true. Then in order to solve it, we just go through all the lines in the file, parse the lines, we get the game ID and the list of samples, and we check if those samples are possible, we add the game ID to solution. You can also check the whole solution code works by running it on the test input, and that also looks good. So we also can run it on the real input, and it turns out that gives the right solution. Okay, for the second part, we want to know a slightly different thing. So we want to know the fewest number of cubes of each colors that would have allowed the elf to show us the corresponding samples. So for the first game, the first sample tells us there must be at least 3 blue and 4 red. The second one tells us there must be at least 2 green, for example, and at least 6 blue, it turns out, and yes, so on. So the first game would have been possible with 4 red cubes, 2 green cubes, and 6 blue cubes. And then once we figured out, we multiply those 3 numbers together and sum of all the lines, and that will give us a solution. So how can we do that in Python? So a lot of stuff we can reuse from part 1, so particularly like the function to parse the line. We can use that again. So in order to solve it, we just go through the lines and then parse each single line to give us the game ID and the samples, or list of samples. And then we can have this dictionary. It tells us for each color the maximum we've seen so far. In the beginning, we set it all to 0 for each color, and then we go through all the samples. And for each sample, we go for each of the colors, and we set the max seen of those colors to the maximum of the previous maximum we have seen and the current sample. And then this will give us, after going through the whole list of samples, this will give us for each color the maximum of that color we have seen in any of the samples. So then the game power was defined as the product of all these 3 values. So we calculate that, add it to the solution, and then will give us the solution. So also for part 2, we want to test that our solution works, and that looks good. So we also apply the code to the real input, and it also turns out it gives us the right solution. All right, that's it for day 2. I hope you enjoyed today's puzzles. Best of luck in the future, and see you around.